Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. Europe shaken by those 400 who drowned in the Mediterranean trying to cross over. This in a week that has seen a startling surge in the number of migrants crossing from Libya towards Italy, nearly 10,000 according to authorities. We're talking about it with immigration researcher Mathieu Tardis of the French International Relations Institute, IFRI, Laura Slimani of not just the French Socialist Youth, to tell us of the European...
Young European Socialists.
Young European Socialists. And we're also with journalist and Syrian refugee Bashar Youssef. Welcome back. The latest arrivals to Italy, stoking predictions. There could be as many as 400,000 this year, say some. And we can show you perhaps how the number of asylum seekers has shot up in the past years. It spiked to 230,000 for 214. There you see how those numbers have increased. And what's interesting in that graph you see is that Germany taking in far more than, say, France and even Italy, which is a talking point that we'll talk about. According to UN figures, Italy, though, very much the gateway where people make their first asylum claims, so that's another issue. And on that point, Mathieu Tardis, there was the leader of the CDU in the German parliament who told the Bild newspaper, Volker Kauder, saying Germany can welcome significantly more refugees. We can and must be able to afford this act of humanity. He made that statement despite the fact that you have this growing anti-immigrant movement in Germany, Pegida.
Yeah, I'm not sure Pegida is such a massive movement within the German society. And what we have seen the last couple of years coming from Germany is Germany that agreed to resettle more and more Syrian refugees. I mean, giving them opportunity to come to Germany. Germany was taking as well the largest share of asylum seekers in Europe, including those who went through Italy, those who went through Bulgaria, those who went through Hungary, were not staying in this country because the reception conditions are not good, and there's no perspective, economical perspective for them. So they are going up to Germany, and Germany is supposed to send them back to this country, but they are not doing that anymore. They need as well manpower for the economy. That's, I think, another thing. But I think they know now that there's no sense to send them back to Italy, Bulgaria, or Hungary. I mean, they would come back anyway. So there's no sense to let people in an irregular manner within the European territory.
Is that counter to the trend in Europe, to hear that from politicians saying we got to take them in?
Of course.
But I think it's interesting because you see that actually there is no relation between the amount of immigrants in a country and where or asylum seekers and the level of far right in the country. And sometimes it's actually the opposite, because when you have politicians who don't make it the central issue of their policy, when you have politicians who say it's not a problem, who say it is what we should do as human beings and as people who have solidarity in their heart, when you say that as a politician, well then you can oppose the speech of the far right, and you can show that your society is not the same, or you don't want the same society as they do. And so the political battle can be led and can be won on these values. But if you don't, if you accept the premises of the thought of the far right and of the right that immigration, asylum is a problem and a threat for society, then you lose the debate. You've lost the debate, and then you have to lead, or you are pushed to lead a restrictive policy.
Bashar Youssef, we were talking in part one about the huge number of Syrian, nearly half the population's either displaced or refugees right now.
Yeah.
Countries like Lebanon have seen their population surge by a quarter as a result of all of this. France, the numbers are very small. Tell me about your personal case. You say it was, what, a year it took you to have your asylum request approved?
No, I came to France in July 2014, and I applied about after 1 month because I have to do some papers. Then it takes me, I think, 5 months to get the decision.
Is that normal for a Syrian?
Excuse me.
Is that normal? 5 months? Is that the?
Yeah, as I know from my friends, it's so normal for Syrians, but it's not normal for other refugees from other countries, because I think we have special procedures because the government in France support Syrian people now in the revolution, and it's huge numbers of refugees. So I think we have a special case.
So despite the fact that the numbers are small, you're saying, you're still more Syrians though who are getting a look in with their asylum requests than citizens from other nations.
Yep. Talking about France, the numbers of Syrians in France are too small because when we were in Lebanon, you have to seek for. You can't choose the country you want to go. You have to do this across the UNHCR. In last few months, we don't know what happened. Now the embassy in Lebanon is receiving more requests and picking up young people with degrees. They can work, they can involve in the French society quickly. So I think I don't have the numbers, but in 2014 the numbers raised up kind of.
All right, it's an interesting point. So it's a migrants, but asylum seekers, but qualified asylum seekers, is what you're describing, that the French are whose applications they're looking at.
France is delivering visas to some Syrian refugees in Lebanon, but according to me, it's about 1,000 visas were delivered that way to Syrians.
There's room for more
last year. And there's 2 million refugees. There's always room for more. There's always room for more. Then it's on what criteria you deliver, you provide the visa to someone or not. I mean, the fact that France is one of the only country in Europe that is giving this what we call protection visa to Syrians, to Iraqi today. It's a good thing. It's something good. It's a good practice, and maybe it's something we should work on at the European level. And in what way more European countries can deliver more protection visa to people like Syrian refugees, but maybe from other countries as well. And this is a good practice. Maybe we have to put forward a bit more.
All right, on Twitter, one viewer saying, I can't imagine a life so bad that I would be willing to risk my life in search of a better one. What's the solution? Bashar Youssef saying, Syrians in a way are the privileged ones. When you look at a nation like Eritrea, it's a lot worse.
It is, because first they have to, it's difficult to leave the country. Then it's difficult to cross the desert, and then they face a lot of danger, a lot of threats all through the migration routes up to Libya. And then you have to cross the sea. So it's much more difficult for Erytrean.
All right, let's bring in now our Italy correspondent, David Willen, to this discussion. David, you were telling us that right now, in the past week, we've seen so many people flock to Lampedusa and try to get into Europe that there's a housing crisis for all these new arrivals and a heated political debate over whether or not Italy can afford to house them.
That's correct. The leaders of the Northern League have been very clear that where they're in charge in northern Italy, they say they don't have room for a single more migrant to be housed on their territory. And the head of the party has invited his supporters to occupy the kinds of places where migrants might be housed, unused army barracks, hotels, schools, anywhere where room could be found to put up very large numbers of people arriving all together in a short period of time. And he says his supporters should occupy these places and physically prevent the refugees from getting in and being able to live on these premises. So feelings are certainly running high, and there is a major problem that Italy has to face, and it's not clear how well organized and prepared the country is to deal with this enormous influx.
All right, a new emergency, you might say, and one that's, as we said, is going to get worse. Last October, France 24 correspondent Seema Gupta went to southern Sicily to get a first-hand look on how the island is able to take in or not that steady flow of new arrivals.
At first glance, she looks like any other child, but at just 8 years old, Asmait is already a survivor. This is a reception center for migrants in southern Sicily. Asmait left Eritrea with her family, but the ship they used to cross the Mediterranean sank. Her mother and 2 of her brothers drowned.
She and her brother witnessed the death of their mother. There's nothing really more tragic than that. When they got here, they were withdrawn, closed. They're still mourning their mother's death.
Asmait's brother Samuel is 11. The 2 of them have been in Italy for 8 months now, and they're busy learning Italian. Like all underage migrants in Italy, Samuel cannot be forcibly repatriated. Italian law mandates that all minors landing on Italian soil be provided with safe housing, food and access to education.
No, gli uomini primitivi. Dove vivevano questi uomini? Dentro le caverne. Le caverne, bravissimo. Sta cominciando sostanzialmente adesso.
He's only now beginning to read and write. Yes, it's a little difficult, but he's trying very hard. I have to say he picks it up really quickly. The fact that he's still young means it's very easy for him to learn.
È molto semplice imparare.
Andiamo in comunità intanto?
This shelter is funded by the state. There are hundreds of them in Italy today. Over 25,000 migrant children landed on the Italian coast this year, most of them arriving alone. Migrant arrivals are now a regular occurrence at this port in Pozzallo in southern Sicily. On this night alone, the Italian Navy rescued over 200 Nigerians, among them women and children.
The journey at sea left them exhausted. It's very scary right from the start. But after some time, they become playful again. They're young, 15, 16 years old. So they tend to make jokes. They're full of life. It's normal.
Once they arrive, the migrants are identified and divided into groups. The weakest are given medical help. Teenagers are bused to reception centers just for minors. We hit there in the morning. This center houses 20 teenagers. Some have been there for 2 months. They're supposed to stay for only 90 days before being transferred to more long-term facilities.
They've lost their innocence, they've lost hope, they've lost trust in adults. They think their lives and their bodies are for sale. They've never been given a hug. Not one caring hug. Most of the migrant children are from Eritrea, Egypt and Somalia. During their journeys, some are tortured by people smugglers. 17-year-old Mohammed is from Egypt. He worked for 3 years to pay for the trip. For him, as for many others, Italy is only a first step.
I want to go to Germany. Many here have escaped. Yesterday, 3 left. They're scared, and they haven't got any money.
Some of those who remain are placed in the care of families. Like this one. Nino Vinci and his wife heeded a call by Pope Francis to open their home to those who need it most.
The most valuable asset we have is our family. So we decided to make ours available. Right from the start, he's really been a son to us. And he calls us Mum and Dad.
Abdurrahman Hassan left Somalia on his own when he was 17. He crossed Ethiopia, Sudan and the Sahara before setting off from Libya on an inflatable boat to Europe. Today, he's working as an intern in a restaurant while pursuing his studies.
I always think of Somalia because Somalia is my country. But in Somalia, there's war. People want to live, work, study, have a future. Because in my country, there is no future.
Hassan plans to stay in Italy, but nearly 3,000 children escaped from reception centers this year to continue their journeys to Northern Europe.
All right, some resilient young faces in that report. Philip Willan, a word about the locals that we saw in that report and that are taking them in. You told us earlier about the Northern League's reaction, saying no to more migrants. How do people in Sicily, in Lampedusa, feel? How do they feel about the migrants?
Well, I think Italians are divided on this issue. There is a tradition of hospitality here. And clearly the influence of the Catholic Church is very strong. The invitations of Pope Francis to come to the aid of people in need. Many people have heeded his invitations and take his urgings very seriously. On top of that, of course, Italy is a country with a history of migration itself. Many people who moved to the United States or Australia in previous decades and centuries in search of a better life. So that's another reason why many Italians feel that they should be as open and hospitable as possible to these new arrivals. But clearly there is a danger that if the numbers become too great, the facilities are overwhelmed, people will start to suffer from a kind of compassion fatigue, and there is a danger that an initial willingness to welcome people will turn to hostility, and there have already been incidents where local people, for example, in the suburbs of Rome, have revolted against the presence of migrants on their territory, and there have been clashes with the police. So it is a difficult issue, and Italians are certainly divided. If the question is not handled well, clearly more people will be lining up with Matteo Salvini on this issue.
All right, and that was definitely on the minds of EU foreign ministers that met in Barcelona this week, a big conference where they talked about migration for the coming months. But as we know already, there isn't going to be a radical rethink. Do you think, though, Mathieu Tardis, when you look at the events that have transpired, and this conference took place just a couple of days ago in Barcelona, when you look at how many people are still arriving now, that there are going to be, in the short term, emergency measures to share the burden with Italy?
Maybe. I mean, the European Commission is going to present a new global migration policy next month in May. I hope there will be some measure on this issue, on solidarity sharing. The European Parliament as well is working on a report on immigration and a holistic approach on immigration. A report is supposed to be out by the end of the year, so it's...
Okay, so there are going to be studies and reports, but what about right now?
I think right now it's really to convince member states, because they are key to change things, because they are the one who can as well work on the public opinion. And you were right to mention that if we don't win the public opinion struggle on this issue, I mean, there's no way out. I mean, we're going to a dead end. And the member states are key to that.
Laura
Yeah, I mean, I can only share what has just been said, and the report has clearly shown the limits of national politics, and it is the case in many areas, and it is the case regarding this. I mean, creating a common space where we live together like Europe means that we need to also create, or to have the means to deal with these issues in common. And the problem of the European construction today is that it is still giving too much power on certain issues to member states, or is not given the sufficient leverage to the European Parliament as such, who should be in charge of it, like it is on other issues, like it is on the market, for instance.
Well, institutional reforms even further down the line.
It's important.
But we saw at that conference at the beginning of the week, the Latvian foreign minister saying it's important to implement already existing working frameworks.
Of course, and that is the case of the current legislation that should be, I mean, that is discussed at the moment in the French parliaments, but hasn't gone through because of the pressures of the right. And so I think it is really a responsibility of the French government to implement this legislation, because France has been condemned by European courts because it hasn't yet implemented these measures, which are not the best that you could imagine, but are still going to improve people's condition in terms of time, of the time that it takes to get an asylum, because I think now the average is 2 years, which is a huge amount of time, especially when you know that these people cannot work, they are not allowed to work, and so then they are accused of being assisted by society, but we don't give them the means to actually do it themselves. And there's another issue that hasn't been raised in the report, but I'd just like to point it out now, is the situation of minors, of under 18s who have a specific protection, and as soon as they are 18, you have a legislation that doesn't allow them to stay, or that gives them makes it much more difficult for them to stay. And it is a real question, because some of them
wind up in
claim
limbo,
they are under 18 and are told by the authorities that they are not, and are sent back to their country even if they have spent a lot of their childhood in France. And so it's a really important issue, and I would like the government as well to be able to legislate on that.
All right, Laura Slimani, I want to thank you. I want to thank Bashar Youssef for joining us, Mathieu Tardis, as well as Philip Willen for being with us from Rome. Stay with us, though, because our Media Watch segment is next. Okay, now James Credence joins us. We did not have a representative of Nicolas Sarkozy's UMP party in our discussion on migration today. Laura Slimani regretted it, her being of the Socialist Party. The UMP party, which soon will no longer be the UMP
That's
party.
right. They're busy rebranding, Francois. So they're thinking more about questions of form, I suppose, at the moment than policy. Well, that's maybe not strictly true. But anyway, the media is looking at this name change that is certain to take place. The logo and all of that hasn't been unveiled yet. The Republicans, les Républicains. So a lot of reaction on social media to that today, Francois. Some saying it's like a snake shedding its skin. I'm not sure that's a very positive comparison, but it's not strictly...
It's pretty innocuous, the Republicans, though. That's a bit unfair.
I suppose, but, you know, you are getting, obviously, the usual sort of slander on social media. It is pretty good at that. Of course, people looking across the Atlantic to the Republican Party, and many saying, look, let's be clear about this. It's not the same name, and it's not the same meaning. Others pointing out that the Republicans, or the French Republicans, have been very supportive of Hillary Clinton. So I suppose that in itself is proof that it's not necessarily indicative of any political alignment with the American Conservatives. The UMP, what about the Socialist Party becoming the Democrats? Again, so a lot of people riffing off that. I think it's not necessarily, strictly speaking, true. Alain Juppé, who is, of course, a rival of Nicolas Sarkozy for the
nomination.
That's right.
For the Republican Party.
Indeed. Well, apparently people close to him aren't too happy with that choice of name. They think it is Nicolas Sarkozy trying to rebrand the party in his image, so to speak, give it a new name, and he's at the head of the party, so it's a more vanity project. project for them.
The predecessor of the UMP was a party called the Rally for the Republic, so it's not that different.
That's right, and indeed some have been, I'm not sure if I have it next, but there have been some saying, look, this is in some way the party going back to its roots, because RPR indeed had the notion of republic in it. That was the party that Chirac founded in '76. But also François Mitterrand had the notion of being Republican. That was back, when was it? I think the year is further up.
1965.
Yeah, so there you go. And indeed, some journalists have been saying, if I can find it, that really the whole notion of being Republican it's no one party should be able to appropriate that idea. It should not be the, I suppose, the what would you say, the monopoly of any one party. And indeed this article in Libération is saying that it's a sort of a semantic hold-up, that the centre-right UMP, now Republican Party, shouldn't be allowed to appropriate this word. But I suppose, you know, a party is entitled to call itself what it will. In any case, lots of buzz about that online today. François, you have your choice of tweets. One journalist for Le Monde saying this is really not practical at all for newspaper headlines. It's just too long. The UMP was much more concise.
You need an acronym. And
that's right.
LR is a bit strange.
It's going to be trouble for us as well on our straps below the screen. So journalists are not impressed.
All right. We'll work something out, I'm sure.
Indeed.
Many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.